Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining my friends and I today for a collaborative event, Art That Makes You Smile. And thank you, Jeannie from Jeannie's Palette, for inviting me to be a part of this great group of friends, creative friends. And as I thought about this project and this collaborative event, I just was drawn to what makes me happy. It's springtime, and I just want to think about all the fun things that just bring joy to my heart. So I'm preparing actually a bamboo cutting board that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to use this as my surface and just putting in some crimson chalk paint to give me a nice surface, thinking about a vintage tricycle. When I think about things that make me smile, I remember when I was a little girl, just a toddler even, and one of my favorite things to do was to ride my tricycle. So I thought I'd go back into my memory banks and try to recreate a piece of art that would give a nod toward those days in my life. And I grew up in a loving home, and the deep red, I was thinking about the red brick house that I grew up in, but as I began to think about my color palette for this, I felt like it was just a little dark. So I thought I would just change it, lighten it up, and I'm actually going to give a nod to my grandmother's house that was right next door, and they just had an old farmhouse, and I thought that would be a much better background for this project. To begin sketching my tricycle, I took some chalk and just sketched out a triangle so I could kind of get an idea of the distance I wanted to put between the front wheel and the back tires. And then I just took some gray paint and began to outline my elements of the tricycle. Pulling in some deeper tones of that crimson, just adding a little brown and black to it, and also not using pure white for the other aspects of the tricycle, but using French linen, something that's kind of a dulled version of white. And let's just watch as we bring it to life. One of the really exciting parts of this design is pulling the black in to create the rubber on the wheels and really give it some dimension and just bringing it to life. And trying to keep in mind which wheels are in the front and getting that thickness right. It just makes a big difference in bringing this piece to life. As you watch me paint some of the details of this tricycle, I have to tell you a funny story. When I was just a toddler and riding my tricycle that I love dearly, I got to feeling too big for my britches, as they used to say, and began to ride my tricycle out to the highway that ran along in front of our house. And We had a really big front yard, so it took me a little bit to get my tricycle out there. But mind you, this was a long time ago, a long time ago, and traffic was not back then what it is now. However, there was still traffic, and it was not a safe place for me to ride. And I had just about made it out to the highway when all of a sudden my mother comes up behind me, and I was in very big trouble for getting that far away from the house and trying to get out on the highway with my tricycle, which we know that would have been a very bad idea. But I was in very large trouble, and I was disciplined all the way back to the house. I never tried that again. When I started painting the spokes in, I did use the French linen to kind of get placement and just evenly disperse those spokes. And then I came right along beside the French linen and added some pure white, some titanium white, to give it a little bit of a pop. And then took a little bit of watered down black, and where the spokes connect to the wheel, I added a little shadow just to give it some realism. When I think about my grandmother's house and using that thought as the backdrop, she always had beautiful hydrangea bushes and chrysanthemum bushes all around her house. So I couldn't resist the chance to put in one of those beautiful flowering bushes right in the side of this piece of art that I can just smell their aroma even today, all these years later. That house is long gone through time and wear, and it did eventually have to be torn down. But I still think about my grandmother's house. I still dream about it at times. It's just such a special place for me in all those years of growing up. I hope that my grandchildren will think about my house the way I think about my grandmother's house. I'm using a fan brush through here to add some texture and some grass elements. I am using a lighter green on underneath this. I do have the darker brown and a dark green, so I'm pulling in some lighter green to give those highlights of the grass, and then I'll be coming back in a little bit later and adding a little more dark green to break up even this lighter green, so it looks a little more realistic, I should say. And I was letting the blooms and stuff dry while I worked on the grass, and now I'm letting the grass dry while I work on these flowers some more and just add in those layers of petals. bush is almost done. We just pulled in some lighter green tones for leaves. Having that depth in the background, that deep dark green, is great for a surface for the leaves, but giving that pop of color and brightness. And we're going in now with some darker green just to kind of break up that lighter green and just giving that variated look instead of everything being so solid. One of the most satisfying parts of doing art for me is the moment when I feel like it's complete and I begin taking that painter's tape off and I'm left with those nice crisp edges. It's just so satisfying. And I want to encourage all of you, when you create art, give it a good try and don't forget to sign your work. And that's what I'm doing now. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll join me again sometime with the next piece. Not sure what it is, but if you'd like me to paint something that interests you, leave that suggestion in the comments. I'd love to know.